It is good, isn't it, how it does it all? Hello, everybody.
All right?
Yes. Brilliant.
Here goes.
Look, it's worked for lots of people, so that's always a good start.
It's going to be a good one.
Yeah. Well, language always is.
Definitely. Unless it's the wrong language, obviously.
Yes, that's very true. That's very true
That's the whole
indeed.
point.
It's just been locked down.
No, just because of the lockdown.
Hi guys.
Hello.
Hiya. Hi Sam.
Hello.
Kieran's joined, Sam.
Right, Brill. Hi, Kieran. How are you? Yeah, fine, fine. You going to put your camera on?
We're actually going out.
Oh, that's good, Kieran. Well done.
I don't know where my camera is.
I'm just going to mute everybody.
Yeah.
Not me, no. I'll now unmute Sam.
I'm out, muted. Yeah, can you unmute Kieran as well?
I think so.
Okay.
There we go.
Hello, Kieran. You all right then?
Yeah.
Good. All right then. So the way that we'll play it is that I'll just keep bringing you in every now and again. All right?
Okay.
To say bits and bobs that you want to say. Okay.
Okay.
All right. And the first half now is just is the video that Alexis has done as well. All right. Are you okay there? I haven't seen you for ages.
Yeah. Been keeping busy with this stuff.
Good. Yeah, that's good. Well, it's better to be busy at the moment because it's not much fun otherwise, is it?
No.
Really? But there we are. Yeah, that's good. Right. Oh, it's 1 o'clock.
Yes. So, hello everybody. We're in that phase of all Zoom meetings where people are still just arriving. So,
yeah.
We'll, if people can bear with us for another couple of minutes as we let people in. So, I'm Simon Duffy from the Centre for Welfare Reform. This is one of our fairly regular webinars post COVID-19 now. But we're very delighted to have Sam Sly, Kieran Murphy and Alexis Quinn, although she's joining us a little bit later. But we will hear from Alexis very soon because we've got a film from Alexis that we're going to play as the first part. But I'll just leave it 1 more minute. For people who are not familiar, the Centre for Welfare Reform is a citizen think tank based in Sheffield, but kind of working internationally. And we also are one of the founders of Citizen Network. And this show is also being broadcast live on Citizen Network TV. So you don't go there now because you'll just see the same thing, but with a 10-second delay or something. But if you want to subscribe to Citizen Network TV or join Citizen Network, that'd be brilliant. It's a global movement for inclusion and equality, for a world where we value being different as a brilliant and beautiful and groovy thing. So that's 2 minutes, isn't it? So I think we're just going to roll, and I just have to do this thing of sharing the screen. So say this first bit will be a film, and it's actually 30 minutes long, so you can just sit back, enjoy, watch, and then after the film, Sam and Kieran will give a talk with some slides, and then there's going to be a chance for discussion. Of course, put questions in the chat as ever. Stay on mute, please, because it'll be distracting otherwise. And yeah, I look forward to this really interesting talk from some great people on a very important topic. So here we go. Let me see if I can roll this. Ding, 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 ding.
Hello, my name is Alexis Quinn. So today's talk is called The Trouble with Alexis Is. And this is a talk about language of disorder and of deficit. So a little bit, about who I am. So I'm a mother, first and foremost. I've got 2 children. I used to be a school teacher, and I've been teaching for goodness, like sort of over 10 years. I'm also autistic, an ex-international swimmer, and I penned my memoir called Unbroken, which details, my time in the mental health system as an autistic person. So, that's quite a lot of sort of positive, if you like, normal, stuff about me. So what we're going to talk about today is the impact of language. We're going to talk about, I guess, really the impact it's had on me. And I think that a lot of my experiences are generalizable. And, what it's done as I've journeyed, I guess, throughout my life. So we're going to look at how it can have the potential to fracture identity, I guess to hope kill, and also how it kind of inflates risk as well. Today, I aim to heighten our awareness of the cultural conditioning influencing the way that we speak about autistic people. And, I want to talk about how the language we use about people that are different impacts us and how we're treated. So this talk will draw our cultural conditioning into the full light of consciousness as a key step in breaking its hold on us. So this is what happened to me. I shared that first slide with you, I guess to look at the sort of positive language that we can have around people. But obviously this slide evokes something very different, doesn't it? Let me just move that out of the way for you. Crisis hit. I was labelled. But it's weird, because the labels that I were given were not to do with when I was swimming or in academia, labels of perseverance, determination, and incredible focus. Instead, when my brother died and I gave birth to my daughter and crisis hit me, the same qualities used to describe me in academia and in sport were completely changed. We no longer talked about perseverance or passion or determination. We talked about obsession. We talked about compulsions. We talked about fixations. We talked about idealizations, all negative, all deficit-based. Yet we were talking about the same qualities in me. The very things that I was lauded for when I was young, encouraged to do, and literally put on a pedestal for, were considered, an undesirable part of me that needed to be treated and needed to be cured. Now, this linguistic framing of people, talking of them as deficits and not as humans, and not as people, and God forbid, assets, which we do so easily and so often, is really at the heart of how we marginalise people. I've never felt so awful as when I was helped by professionals, by people that were supposed to be there. My future was never so limited. I was never so harmed, and my well-being was never so broken as when I went into crisis and I needed help. So why? Well, my reaction to the grief I was experiencing and the trauma of birth located the problems that I was experiencing in myself. And it didn't look at the collective responsibility that society and the system was having and was influencing on me. And as far as I can tell, I don't really have an inbuilt problem. If you think back to that first slide of me, I didn't look like somebody with a problem, but you can see in this slide I really was, and a lot of that is from societal discrimination. So I mentioned that I was autistic. Just look at the criteria here used to categorize and describe autistic people. Persistent deficits in social communication. Now, I've been talking to you for a little while now. Would you say that my communication, you know, has a deficit? Certainly it's different. Certainly it's different. And when I was in units and when I was in crisis, I was in fact mute, okay? But I was still communicating. I was still communicating, just not in a traditional way. So the language used really to describe this disposition in people is so negative. Have a look down here. Restrictive, repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities. Most people have that. When I was swimming, were my interests restrictive, repetitive patterns of behavior as I swam up and down for 5 hours a day? No. I was determined, right? I had amazing perseverance. I was committed. So this kind of othering that we do to people, this language which we use to describe them, is horrendous. Nobody wants to be disordered. Nobody wants to. I don't think we even want to set about treating people in this way. But we do. And we try to make them look more normal. My disposition is my disposition. It's an autistic disposition, but it's not a disordered disposition. So at the heart of this is a fundamental lack of acceptance, isn't it? You know, difference, which is actually ingrained in the language which we use. Now have a look at this. This is what was used to detain me. Okay, this is the section paper. So I suffer from a mental disorder, namely ASD and ADHD, unaccompanied by language or intellectual impairment, marked deficits in social emotional reciprocity, lack of empathy, intolerance of others, impaired theory of mind and perspective taking, lack of, impaired, right? Deficits in non-verbal communicative behaviours, difficulty interpreting body language, emotions, low self-esteem, deficits in flexible thinking and behaviour, rigid and obsessive thinking and behaviour, preference for routines, predictable activities. Now, I feel uncomfortable reading this. I feel ashamed. I feel depressed. I feel anxious. I feel embarrassed about these words used to describe me. Now, this is not the basis upon which to build helpful relationships. And I use the word helpful because autism can't be treated. My disposition is my disposition. It's embodied. Now, if people want to really help, they need to establish relationships built on mutual trust, respect, genuine collaboration. They need to understand the reasons that I'm presenting in the way that I am. But I don't see this happening here. In fact, this recommendation, this opinion argued that I had level 3 autism, the most severe. And this is the way that I was seen, you see. Now, I am no one else, nobody, easily fits into a medical classification. Many of us can't relate to these terms and the deficits narrative we're forced to assume. So what I want to do is just spend a moment and let's just think about using language in a more empowering way. So let's say that I'd been admitted to this unit. I needed help. Absolutely, I needed help. But instead of writing something like this and casting me linguistically in this way, which obviously affects the treatment I receive, let's ask these questions. What is Alexis feeling? What is Alexis needing? How do I feel as the professional in response to Alexis? What are my needs behind my feelings as a helper when I'm in Alexis's company? What action or decision could I request Alexis take in the belief that it might help her live more happily? Now notice that our responses as a helper to these questions reveals a lot about ourselves and our values. We as helpers would be far more vulnerable than if we were to simply use the language of deficit, disorder and diagnosis. Because those questions are asking questions about ourselves and putting helpers on equal footing. Whereas questions of diagnosis, deficit and disorder, as you see here, firmly put me down. So when people don't understand me and my fellow autistic, they attribute the confusion to a problem in us. That's what's been done here in this opinion and recommendation. Alexis has communication deficits. People so easily attribute the breakdown in communication to me. Yet when I was in hospital, I was communicating very clearly. I didn't have a deficit in communication. I just wasn't speaking. We need people to start owning their own problems. It's you as the helpers that maybe don't understand us. So what you could say is, Alexis, I'm confused. I'd like to see the connection between what I've said and your response, but I don't. Would you be willing to explain how your communication relates to what I've just said? Now, I would have understood that request. Okay, I've written that dialogue, to meet my needs. I might not have been able to have had at that time a pleasant chit chat with you, but I could certainly have communicated what it was to help you understand. So what I'm saying is, helpers need to search a little bit harder and listen a little bit differently and think about their role in language. The point is this: when people let go of the medical narrative, the deficit narrative, and instead stay connected to what was happening for me, the results were positive. When I fled to Africa, I was on a section 3 and I fled the country. Police were chasing me, helicopters, goodness knows what else. You'd think I was a fugitive. But anyway, I digress. When I fled to Africa, people connected with me, not knowing my history, not knowing my diagnosis, and weren't flooded with hurtful language to describe me. They looked at the real me. They saw a human that had needs, and they built positive relationships, and I flourished. Within 6 weeks of my escape, I was working again as a teacher in a prestigious British curriculum school. Because you see, human growth happens when individuals meet on an equal level and express themselves vulnerably and authentically. This type of relationship rarely exists for many autistics because we are done to and we are not done with. Authenticity is the prerequisite of growth. For autistics to grow and blossom, we need to feel equal. We need to be viewed equally. And the way that we're viewed is influenced by the way that people talk about us. This is the hospital treatment that I received. This was what happened to me. I was taken from my family, from my home. I was detained for being autistic. There's no treatment, as I say, for autism. In hospital, I was encouraged through positive behavioural support and behaviourist methods to, stop doing the things which made me look different and to start doing things that made me fit in. Now, it's interesting to me that I didn't need to fit in when I was doing things that society valued. Society only had a problem with me when I was no longer seen as useful or productive in their eyes. Anyway, I digress. Anyway, so positive behavioural support. It sounds good, right? Especially that bottom left picture down there. Stop being autistic, stop being autistic. Altering my disposition, great idea. So what did that lead to? Well, that led to a lot of masking, didn't it? I was taught compensatory strategies and behaviours to mask my autism-related cognitive differences. And what are we talking about here? We're talking about perhaps stimming, self-soothing behaviour, an intense love for certain subjects, and my challenging behaviour, running a lot. I used to roll down the corridor. Sure, it bruised my back a bit, but I felt better. Did I need to be restrained for that? And I was considered, one of the lucky ones because I was high functioning enough to use these compensatory behaviours in response to I guess, the systemic pressures, you know, to the pressure to act more normal, basically. I was given a star chart. You know, when I did something good, I got a star. If I collected enough stars, I got to go outside. Now, the idea is laudable. Yes, I get that. You know, we need to fit into a certain degree. We need to kind of, you know, function as effectively as possible. But this compensation, it's a euphemism for coercion. It teaches us to adopt and to generate new behaviours to avoid negative outcomes. Negative outcomes, you know, which workers and helpers and carers and so on inflicted on me, inflicted on us, by the way. So to increase opportunities given to us by people with more power than us, to help us meet society's expectations of behaviour. The issue with this, well, it focuses on outward behaviour, doesn't it? And doesn't look at what all this modification is doing to the emotional well-being and impact it's having on our love and respect for ourselves. So despite plenty of research indicating the negative impact of this on our well-being, you know, it's gold standard. I craved praise, the odd reward, you know, of getting to go outside and eat my favourite food. But I couldn't always meet the expectations, and I'd feel like such a failure. And that had a severe impact, you know, on my mental health and well-being. Yeah, there isn't a problem with teaching people how to fit in as long as it's led by the person, it's not forced. But the fact that we even think it is okay is because of the way language and society casts us, that we constantly need to improve and be better. You know, notice, you know, when I talk in this way, it reveals very little about what's going on in the praise giver. And instead, you know, it focuses instead on the autistic person. It establishes the speaker as someone who sits in judgment. This is what the language does. And judgments can be both positive and negative. Judgments which imply rightness and wrongness, these are life-changing. They're life-alienating ways of communicating. And as I've already explained that, yeah, sure, there's lots of evidence about the immediate impact of praise, you know, which has on behaviour. In the short term, people usually do respond to praise and to compliments. But research has shown that in the long time, this type of behaviour modification doesn't impact well on people. And the thing is, the beauty of gratitude and the way that we talk to autistic people, especially those in crisis, especially children, is to celebrate, to genuinely celebrate, and not just reinforce behaviour to get something in return. It makes us feel anxious and crappy when we don't meet your expectations. So let me ask you this. What about teaching people to adapt to us? Just a little bit. A radical idea, I know. You know, what about telling us that we're perfect just the way that we are? And to love our uniqueness and to create plans with us that connect with us on a deep level, to communicate autistically and to listen with more than just your ears. What about meeting us halfway? And what about not expecting us to make all the adjustments? You know, don't let autism define you, they said to me in hospital. But it does define me. It does define me. And saying that really sort of makes me feel crappy, because it's more than a diagnosis of autism, isn't it? You know, it's a way of being. It's not something that I suffer from. It's a disposition. Yes, there's lots of traits that were very disabling at times. You know, I spent 3.5 years in hospital. I was restrained 97 times. I was secluded. I was long-term segregated. I know the impact of autism, but actually it wasn't autism. It wasn't autism. It was a model of difference which doesn't celebrate diversity, but shuns it. And we know from the social model of disability that this is largely because the world isn't designed for me and my fellow autistics. Where I was kept was sensory charged. It aggravated this sensory system. This isn't just my brain up here. My brain is all of this neurology is autistic. The whole structure of me is autistic. It's an inextricable part of me. It defines me, every aspect of my existence. So without being autistic, I'm not the person that I am. So don't tell me that it shouldn't define me. And people say that, why? Because they see it as something negative. Because the language around it, autism, is disease-ridden, something to be eradicated. But that separation, encouraging that separation is so damaging. Detained for autism, treated for autism, a person with autism, like I'm broken, like I've got no chance of getting better because it's neurological. It hope kills. It hope kills. So I grew to hate the part of myself which was autistic, which was basically all of me, the part that was wrong, that I was told was wrong, all the disorders I had. Why? Why did I hate it? Because I was taught to hate it. I didn't hate it when I was a swimmer. I didn't hate it when I was getting my first class honours degree. In fact, I'd never hated autism or Alexis Quinn until I was helped to hate myself by professionals, because I was put at odds with myself. I was told to focus on the part of me which was broken and needed to be overcome. So I was at a constant war with myself, which I could never win, because, we can't change all of this. So I understand that nobody went to work to make me feel that way. But this is what language does, isn't it? And it's insidious. It permeates our culture. And it led it leads to mental health problems. Have a look at these statistics here. Is it surprising that 1 in 3 autistics experience severe mental health? That 2/3 have felt suicidal and 1/3 have felt so bad that they've attempted suicide? According to these stats down here, I've only got a few years left to live. And look at these. This is what happened to autistic people because of the way that we talk about them and the way that we cast them in society. Us, them, disorder, deficit, impairment. When what is expected of us isn't what we want for ourselves, it's the goals of society. For example, for me to access the community, right, Alexis has to access the community. This is what I earned with my star chart. I don't want to go there. That's what it looked like for me. That was my reward, was to go out into a sensory charged environment. I was pushed to manage this environment, which isn't conducive to me. Of course, I'd react autistically and I'd melt down. Then I'd failed and I'd be punished. But aren't our reactions normal? Aren't they to be expected? Why did I have to go to the supermarket? I wish the people, that had worked with me had asked, are the goals for Alexis things she actually wants? Or are they the same goals that we have for non-autistic people imposed on her because of a set of ideals, things that we think everybody should be able to do? And this is how I grew up. And this is what happened to me again in hospital. And I say to you, gently encourage, don't force. When I was in hospital, I was a level 3 autism. They wanted me to be a level 2 and then a level 1, somebody that wasn't quite as disordered as when they first went in. But my neurology doesn't change. So what are our goals? And whose goals are they? Do the team goals or the family goals for your autistic loved ones and people include happiness? Do they include creativity and the ability to choose a safe path if they want to? Do the goals include socialising autistically, sharing lives with autistic peers, being able to focus deeply? Or are you ramming a square peg into a round hole, making no progress, but just damaging that peg? I think what we need to do, you know, is to think about this autistic orbit. You know, this is a great analogy because, you know, everyone kind of is orbiting the sun, right? But this autistic orbit, which is Pluto, you know, Pluto's got a slightly different orbit, and it's valid in its own right. The orbit's fine. It's fine. What we need to do, though, is to support that orbit. Because most of the reports written about me and the goals I was supposed to achieve, but there's a long list of deficits that I need to celebrate correcting. You know, narratives about risk reduction, you know, portraying me really as a danger, basically, to be controlled. And we need to think, don't we, about how we can make the reports and the goals for our people, you know, full of care, joy, and positivity, and hope, and have bigger aspirations. Because it's these things and the language around these things which enable better mental health. Let's not make our loved ones a statistic. And good communication, the language we use, is one way. And I can tell you that as an inpatient, there was no effort made to enable authentic language and communication. You know, but look, we can only do this if we think about people differently. And that starts, doesn't it, with using and thinking about more enabling language to identify, to love, and to care for our unique, fabulous people. Because we need to hear, we need people to hear our pain, you know, that's caused by how people in society talks about us, yet the damage that it's doing. And we need you guys to reflect back to those paragraphs written about me, those ones at the very, very start earlier, and hear and feel what I felt when I read those sentences to you. The shame, the embarrassment. Because we need to use language that tells autistic people to be proud of themselves, that they are enough and that they have strengths. We may feel awkward deviating from the status quo in the way that we speak. So take your time. But, you know, if your intention is to truly live life in harmony with how we feel about autistic people, then we're going to want to take our time, aren't we? And to think about, you know, what terms we're using to describe our loved ones. Because when I see autism, you know, I see a disposition, I see a culture, I see something beautiful. I see people desperately wanting acceptance. I see platforms being built which allow autistic people to speak for themselves. You know, so the world can see the remarkable insights that we have and our talents, and are better able to nurture us and enable us to contribute positively. So when I speak of, you know, I guess autism defining me, it's that definition really that I'm talking about. Because obviously when we're proud, we can speak for ourselves, can't we, in a way that's most comfortable. So I guess we need to use language which encourages people to feel pride, to let autistic folk know by the way that we talk about them that they are valued and that they do matter. And you know, it took me years to stop apologising for myself, but when I did stop apologising, you know, I felt better and reassured. And if you ever read my book, you'll see that you're actually very lucky to be alive and standing here today. And, you know, I was never discharged from section. I was never discharged from mental health services. You know, I literally fled the country. And I'm lucky to have escaped and to have had those resources to, you know, to rebuild my life again. So I feel lucky to be able to stand here basically and tell you, you know, what helped and what didn't help. And I'm afraid that we really do need to start thinking about the language that we use, and what sort of language is harmful and what sort of language is helpful. Certainly, I've hoped to have convinced you that we need to change the way we talk about autistic people. And hopefully you've got a bit more of the understanding of the impact that that's had on me and likely many other autistic people. So the impact's real. Thank you.
Well, that was very powerful indeed. And
That was amazing. And Alexis just joined us, I think,
Oh,
on
brilliant.
the call. Although
That's
with
good.
the
Good.
boxes, I can't quite see.
Good. Well, we'll be able to talk about that more. We'll get on with the next presentation now. And then what I was thinking was that at the end, Kieran and I and Alexis will be here to have any discussions that you want as well, if that's okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I, of course, I'm not autistic. I don't have a learning disability. So this is coming from someone who was a professional, and try very hard to not use language. And this is a bit about the reasons why, when Simon's able to put the slides up. But for anybody that does know me on the call, they'll know that this is something that I'm quite passionate about, and we'll talk about at any opportunity, Kieran, won't I? So that was why I wanted to do this today. So we're going to be talking today, as you're aware, about language. I do something called life planning as well, and it's one of the ways I can make sure that I'm producing documents for people at the end of it that are as positive as possible for people. So that's how I test myself every time I start doing that work. Can we have the next slide? So today, we've probably not got enough time for a break, but I'm going to talk a bit about something called serviceland. And again, people that know me will have heard about this before, but I'm just going to explain a bit about serviceland. And then I'm going to talk a bit about, and Kieran as well will help me, about why we think perhaps professionals use the serviceland language, which is all the stuff that Alexis was talking about earlier, all those horrible reports and things that are written about people. So we're going to have a little look about that and ask your opinions on that as well. And I'm going to talk a bit about the damage that language can do. So again, it's been reflected in what Alexis has already said, but just how much you can influence somebody's life for the positive or the negative by the ways you write or speak about people. And then we're going to have a think about what people that have been listening, what you guys want to do next, what you want to take away from this. And so that's what we're going to be doing. Simon, the next one?
Done it, I think.
Yeah, and the next one after that, though.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's all right. I've just talked about them all. So we're going to talk a little bit about serviceland now. And I know this is even a made-up word itself, but I feel okay with using it because it's a made-up world for a made-up place. So it isn't talking about something that's real, to be quite honest. This is talking about a quasi-life, quasi-world, really, that we as professionals have made for people with learning disabilities and people with mental health needs and autistic people. So basically people that are discriminated against. And it's basically somewhere that we wouldn't want to live ourselves. So it's making housing solutions and support solutions that if we were offered the same, I don't think we would agree to accept them. So it's a very odd place. And it's, again, as Alexis was saying earlier, it's a place that perpetuates othering. So it's somewhere where we can talk about them and him and all those things that we wouldn't want to talk about ourselves about. It restricts choices. So a home to somebody with a disability in serviceland isn't often a home that we would choose for ourselves or want to live in. I think for some people who are born with a disability, it's somewhere that pretty much stays with them from when they're born until they die, unless they're lucky enough to get themselves out of it. It's not usually with the help of other people. And it has its own language and culture and expectations. And that's, so people in serviceland become service users. And it's okay for them to live with strangers. And the expectations we have for people in service land are not as high as those that we would have for ourselves. And we wouldn't want to live there ourselves, but the people that are within service land don't have much choice at all. Kieran, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, basically the language of service land, I think, is designed to exclude anybody not in that particular branch of service land. There's even different languages within service land. There's health speak and there's social services speak. An example of that was, I mean, we all know how highly educated doctors are. You know, just you have to do a university course just to become a very, very junior doctor. And to become a GP, you have to do even more university level courses. So I'm not going to kind of argue with anyone about how intelligent doctors are, but I was at a meeting, this is a couple of years ago now, and making it real. Thomas, are you familiar with the making it real process?
No.
Jenny and I were sitting at a table with a mixture of professionals, some social services, some GPs, a couple of commissioners, and the document, as it had been written at that stage, was so social services driven, that even the well-educated doctors couldn't understand it.
So it's like a secret language, a secret social service language that the doctors couldn't even understand. And the problem with having these secret languages that no one else can understand is they can mean whatever the person that's using it wants it to. I mean, okay, law has a language of its own as well. That's very true.
But I actually like the language of law. I understand this. I can go to the official documents and go, okay, that says such and such, that says such and so. Okay, that's what I'm allowed to do. That's what I'm not allowed to do.
Right, Kieran, should we'll carry on with this one a bit later? Yeah, move on a little bit. All right then. So what this presentation isn't about is saying that everybody's wrong and getting you all anxious and worried about what on earth you're going to say and not wanting to open your mouth, because what I'd also like to say to people is that we're all in this together, okay, and we're in service land because that's where we all work, and it's something that we've developed in ourselves over time. So this is giving opportunities for us to reflect on things. And I'm no angel, and I still use language and words that I would not like to, sometimes get it wrong. But it's just, it's one of those things. But I think sometimes we don't subconsciously use words, so we don't always mean to say the things that we're doing. And sometimes people use words because they've picked them up and they think that's what they should be doing. So there's all sorts of reasons why, which again we'll talk about a bit more in a minute. But at the end of the day, this is about trying to change those things. And I think the one lesson for everybody is that we all have the power within ourselves to change ourselves. So whatever else is going on out there, as Kieran was just describing about that kind of meeting, that doesn't mean we have to buy into it. And I think what I like about being able to challenge language is that it's something I can do myself. There's barriers to a lot of things within the work that we do that we can't change on our own. You know, there's massive things that need total culture change for things, but the culture of the language that you talk and what you write is up to you to be able to change. So I guess that's something that I get out of this, that I can actually do something every day to change and hopefully help the people that I'm working with. So has anybody got any examples of serviceland words and things that they've heard? If you want to write things in the chat, that would be good. What have we got on there? People are starting to write things. Can we go on to the next slide?
Hopefully. I seem to have I'm desperately pressing things now, Sam, because I can't seem to quite get the controls to work. I may have to somehow see if I sorry everybody.
That's all right. We'll carry on. People can just say about why do you think that professionals use words then? What are the reasons that you think professionals have to use this kind of language? Do people know? So, you know, because we don't have to do it, but we all do, don't we? Yeah, power, that's a very, very good one there. Definitely. Yeah, exactly. To make you feel a bit more knowledgeable about stuff, especially if you're new. I remember being first time being a social worker and being so scared and not even wanting to put my hand up to ask what people meant by certain things they were saying. So I'd write it down and then go and scurry off and try and ask somebody afterwards, because you feel like you're not going to be in with people, or people are going to think you're silly if you don't know what they're talking about. Right, if you go on to the next one after that, Simon, that would be good. So these are some of the reasons, these are some of the reasons that I've kind of thought about why people use certain language. You know, as people were saying, because it's used by others, so you're trying to fit in, makes us feel important. And again, you know, it's not just highly paid for professionals. We all use this language, and there is some research that says that people that are, you know, support workers who maybe aren't, you know, aren't valued really. And we know even with this the coronavirus that we've had, that people haven't been valued, that actually using language that puts you above the people you're supporting is something that makes people feel better about themselves as well. And because we're lazy, so some of these things, it always makes me laugh when people use acronyms or whatever it is, where you see like ASD and people don't even know what they blooming mean. So it's kind of lazy way of not saying somebody's autistic or whatever. And then there's the more worrying things, which is that actually it dehumanizes people, and people use language because they don't see people as they see themselves, and that's where it can lead to quite not nice stuff going on really. And again, you know, another thing within serviceland is there because we restrict what we give to people, so we restrict their access to housing and services, and again using language that can kind of dehumanize people and make them not so worthy makes it a bit easier for us to sometimes tell people they can't have things or restrict people's services as well. So there's lots of things. Some of it's not nice, some of it we don't realise we're doing, but all of it hurts people, and actually none of it, we don't have to do any of it. Can we go on to the next one? So this always makes me laugh. This I think it probably came up on Facebook. Most things do, don't they? But there are so many times where I have had a referral for, you know, to start working with somebody, And when you read it, you wonder how you're ever going to get in the room with the person, because they're so dangerous, and there's so many things about them that makes it feel hard, and when you actually get to meet that person, they are nothing like what's described, and you just wonder what damage has been done by this misinformation about somebody going around everywhere. I mean, again, Alexis was brilliant with her, you know, her examples from her life about how what's written down can affect people. But, you know, I mean, most of the time now I don't bother reading stuff until after I've met the person, because it's just not worth it. And then you can make up your own mind about people. But I'm sure all of you have met somebody in your life, more than once probably, where you think, where did that all come from? Because that isn't the person that I've just met. Can I have the next one, Simon? So this is on this slide is Kieran's here partly because he was one of my inspirations when I started a campaign that I've been running for a while, which is called I Am Challenging Behaviour. I went and did some work with Kieran and some others up north from here. And Kieran came up with this amazing quote, which just summarises everything so well, I think, in a very cheeky way, about how, you know, how it seems to those people that are having this language used on them as such. But, you know, it doesn't make any of us look good or clever, to be quite honest, Kieran, does it? Using language like that. In fact, it makes you kind of want to laugh at people, really. So yeah.
And in all honesty, Sam,
yeah,
sometimes that is about the most productive thing you can do when it's not actually happening to you. Obviously,
yeah.
Obviously, when it is happening to you, it's rather difficult to just laugh at something.
Absolutely, exactly that, and that's what we're going to talk a bit about now, Kieran, is actually how it can affect people's lives extremely badly. So can you go on to the next one, Simon? So language can most definitely damage people, absolutely, and again, Alexis' example of her life was exactly how that can affect somebody. I'm going to describe it a little bit by talking about somebody who has influenced me quite a lot, and that's Wolfensberger, social role valorization, which some people may have heard about and others may not have. And I know now you know, what he did was a very long time ago, and I'm aware that nowadays some of the stuff that he talked about and thought was good practice then probably isn't as much now. So, you know, the whole thing about just as Alexis was saying again earlier, trying to change people isn't what we want to do with people now. But one of the things that Wolfenberger did talk about, which still I think is as important now as it was when I read it, probably 30 years ago now, something like that, was his discussions about the wounds that that people with learning disability experience through what we as professionals do to people. Simon, could you just put it on to the next one? Oh, Simon's gone.
I'm here. It's not changed.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. So Wolfensberger talked about 18 wounds. I haven't written them all up there, but if you have a look at these, language plays a part in quite a lot of them. And what his ideas were that it's a bit like, in my mind's eye, I can see somebody sort of being either stabbed or like shot at with a bow and arrow, and the more times that happens, the more damage it does to you, and in the end you die. And that's very much what his thoughts were on this, that you can start with little wounds, and sometimes people might think that the way you talk and what you write about somebody are those first wounds for somebody, but as stuff goes on, that leads to other things happening to people. So for example, you know, you might then start segregating people, which we do. So putting them in places together when to live or to do things during the day. And then you might start, because of that, treating people as if they're all the same. And that leads to people not being seen as their own individual person, but a group of devalued people. And then you might get on to actually thinking, well, because they're not really people, they don't really deserve a life, and therefore their lives get wasted. And at the end of it all, and we know about this, that people can actually die from what happens because we're not actually treating people as humans. And I very much think that what we write about people and what we say about people underpins all of the wounds that Wolfenberg is talking about. And if we don't do something about that, you know, people have wasted lives and people die. And that sounds a bit dramatic, I suppose, but I think all of us know of people who have had situations where they have not been seen as people and they have had terrible things happened to them in their lives. So, you know, there is evidence out there that if you don't think about what you write and if you don't think about what you say about people, it can end up with really negative things happening for people. So what, like, next slide, please, Simon. Can you just put down on the chat some of the words then? I know you'd started doing it, but are there other words that you think are used in Serviceland? And words that are used there aren't used anywhere else. They're just used in this weird world of work. When we go and work with people with learning disabilities or autistic people, when we go back home again, we use a completely different language. So what are the kind of words that you only find when you're working, basically? Anybody want to put up? Abscond. Oh, well done, Lisa. Oh, we like abscond. Yeah, challenging behaviour. Definitely. I mean, we do, I must admit, we do those again on Facebook. We often have a laugh, which, you know, isn't a laugh really, but about some of the words that we come across as we're going around places. Accessing the community, seclusion and restraint. Yeah, Kieran, can you think of some good words?
The one that I find annoys people is service user.
Yeah, blimmin' service user, exactly. Exactly. And ADLs, all those blimmin' acronyms for things that you don't even know. Lego therapy, that's another one. Some of it is just ridiculous, to be quite honest. But there we are. Attention seeking. Yep. Absolutely. So could you put the next slide up, Simon? So these are two of my favourites. And as I say, challenging behaviour was one that I used to when we were setting up the campaign that I run, I Am Challenging Behaviour. That was because that one just gets on my nerves so much. But when you think about it, so, you know, part of Again Today is for us to think about what we say and talking and what the meaning of that, you know, how that affects people. And challenging behaviour is a word that has no meaning. And if you think about it like that, then you'll probably stop using it. And I must admit, that is one that I don't use at all anymore. You don't have to, because there are other words that we can use to describe what we're trying to say. But by using it, it in its own way lumps a whole load of people together. It's very unhelpful because it doesn't help you to understand what's going on for somebody. So at the end of the day, if somebody has challenging behaviour, we've got no way of understanding what we need to do to support that person, because what is challenging behaviour? You know, you need to be thinking about what it is that that person's experiencing, just as Alexis was saying earlier. You know, are they hurting? Are they sad? Are they angry? Are they frustrated? Those are the things that are going to help you to help somebody. But the other thing about that word is that it has very negative connotations. So it makes everybody think that that person's dangerous and that the risks, there's lots of risks, and people are fearful of people. And again, when you're using serviceland language, you end up with serviceland solutions. So it doesn't open up ideas about using the normal things that you or I would do when we were angry, upset, you know, all that stuff that's out there that everybody else uses to help themselves. Instead, we look at hospitals and stuff like that instead. Okay, so, yeah, go on, Kira.
I have a slightly different problem with the term challenging behaviour. It's basically that because it is such a meaningless term and it only means whatever the person using it says it means. As an advocate, how do you actually challenge that, having that label?
Say that bit again, sorry.
As speaking as a self-advocate, as a senior member of a self-advocacy organisation, how do you even challenge something that is so poorly defined?
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, I think it's by asking. So my challenge when people use those words is basically just to say, what does that mean? Because then they have to think about, actually, what have I just said, and what am I? Do you know what I mean? And it kind of puts it back into their court, doesn't it? And that's a challenge that seems to work for me anyway, when I'm asking things like, you know, when people are using that language, because you aren't going to actually get very much farther with your meeting, are you? If you're just being told that somebody's got challenging behaviour, you're not actually going to be able to come up with any solutions, really, are you? So yeah, and anyone can do that, can't they? Can ask that. So just quickly, just to say about placements, my other one, and I really hate this word because, again, it just doesn't help people, and it's used so much with people. But if you think about how it would affect you to feel that you were being told that where somebody was looking for you to live or where you were living at the moment wasn't a permanent solution, so it was a temporary, which is what placement is. I mean, placement in the dictionary, it doesn't relate to somebody living somewhere. It's about somebody having a work, you know, somewhere to work temporary or whatever. It's just made up. But, you know, all those people whose homes are being described as placements, it's just, you know, very, very sad, and it doesn't have to happen. So
the implication being that where you are living, however temporary or otherwise, because a lot of placements are extended and extended and extended, it is often viewed as the professional's workplace to use it in its proper context before it is ever your home.
But I think as well it gives people the ability not to be looking for somebody as a permanent place, but also they won't be looking at the same kind of places. When we look for a home, we're looking for somewhere to live because we want to stay there and we want to be secure. You know, placement just is not a good word.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of looking to move house in.
But you're not going to look for a placement, are you?
the next couple of years. I'm looking for something that's going to be just as good in 20, 25 years.
Exactly. But I bet you don't go to the estate agent and say, what placements have you got then that I could move in? Or if you went there, they would look at you as if you were in the wrong place, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Simon, could you move on to the next one? So just as, again, I keep saying what Alexis said before, which was brilliant to have. It's amazing to hear it out. You know, somebody who's experienced this as well. But the whole other thing, that's what serviceland does, and that's what language does. And it firmly keeps people in serviceland and different, and us being able to do things to people that we wouldn't do to ourselves and we wouldn't do to our own loved ones. And that's just by using language. Next one. So I just thought of some top tips, because when I do this and I rant on, I usually get asked, well, what would you do about it? And I'm sure we'll have some discussions about that at the end as well. But my top tips are, and this is again what I do sometimes, is look up in the dictionary. There is all, if it's a word that's real, so if it's a real thing, like that all of us would want to do, there's a word for it already, and it's probably in the dictionary. So use that word. And if it's a weirdy word, if it's a serviceland word, it's not real anyway. So if it was up to me, I just wouldn't bother using it whatsoever, to be quite honest. So that's my kind of top tips. And also don't use acronyms or those, you know, like ASD stuff, because why shorten somebody? It's very impolite, really, to be doing things like that when you're talking to somebody or describing somebody. You know, you should give them all of what they're entitled to and your respect. And being respectful isn't using acronyms that nobody knows what they blooming mean in the first place. So that would be my top tips around what. Have you got any top tips, Kieran? What would you say?
It's basically talk in a language that's understandable to everybody. At the very least, talk plain English.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, but we have a language, don't we? We have a language that we all understand, that everybody can use, and most of these words have just been made up for people with learning disabilities and people who are autistic people, or people with mental health problems. You don't hear them anywhere else, and you know that by talking to people that have nothing to do with the work we do or our lives, and they don't know what you're talking about. So, you know, stick to the language that we were brought up and taught in school, and there's always a word that you can use for what you want to describe. Would be my top tip. But I'm going to leave it there because it's 5 past now. So I'm going to, if we can just open it up now to our, because I think the slides will be available. We can send them out anyway, can't we? Hi Alexis, you're here now. Brill. So, what do people want to say something or ask a question of any of us? Here is your opportunity. You're on mute at the moment. Can they unmute themselves, Simon? Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe. Sorry, I had quite a few technical headaches in that. So my brain's a bit stretched, but we can try. You could pick out
or put your hand up. Put your little.
I've done it, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Go for it then. Right, who was that?
There's a question in the chat, Sam, can I jump in?
Yeah, of course you can.
There's a question in the chat about, I work with parents of children who are not meeting the typical milestones for their age. Parents are really worried. What would you say to those parents? I think that we need to move away from a medical model, you know, which places the problem in the person. And I think we need to move away from a social model which places the problem, you know, in society. And I think we need to look, you know, when children are developing, at capabilities. You know, what is it that the baby or the child, you know, wants to do, and how can we help them to get there? Because these comparisons, when we're comparing against other people, it's really not helpful. And in fact, you know, autistic people, you know, like myself, like some people that are on this call, in fact, you know, we have so many different abilities, that sort of comparison, as I say, is really unhelpful. So I would say to parents, look, what is it that your child wants to do? If they're not there yet, how can we help them to get there? And think about what it is that they need to do as well. And they don't need to be like everybody else.
And milestones, they're put in, like you say, by professionals, and most children don't meet them when they're meant to, do you know what I mean? Or have a variation of them. You know, people are all different, aren't they? And they need to do things at different times, really. So was there anything we talked about that people don't agree with, that they like to think through? Because you can, because that's, you know, that's what we're all like.
Yeah.
No? Well, what do people want to go in? Are people going to go away and think or do anything a bit differently?
Let's see if we can.
Yeah, that's very true, Gillian. So you've just said jargon and terminology is taught in training. It absolutely is. You're right. And the skill is knowing what it means, but choosing to use plain. Yeah.
I think pushing back, I think we need to push back a bit.
Yeah.
I think we need to push back, and I think we need to say, you know, I think, you know, look at where the power is, you know, and certainly in terms of, you know, autism and learning disabilities, the power is with, you know, psychiatrists, isn't it? And it's with that medical model. And they're obviously invested in keeping things the same. So I think there's something about pushing back and saying, actually, you know, we don't like this, and this actually isn't helpful, and it is in fact harming us. And I think when we start speaking differently about people, you know, that have different dispositions, people notice.
Yeah,
and it's about then explaining that and explaining why we're doing that.
Yeah, and I think, and what I said earlier as well, which I, you know, hold to myself, is doing it myself. So even at the time, because it's not always the ability to challenge things. Sometimes you're in a situation, it just doesn't feel right at that minute, but continue to do it yourself. You know, you can start tomorrow morning by saying, you know, I'm not going to use those words anymore. I'm going to think of other words. Do you know what I mean? And kind of build your confidence up like that. But all of us can do it for ourselves. We don't have to wait for somebody else to tell us. When I had somebody that made me laugh, I was doing some training about this, and a professional said, but I was saying about paperwork and how they don't have to write their paperwork like they were. Do you know what I mean? They can use different words. And they said, well, no, we can't, because the bits that are printed there already have these words in them. Do you know what I mean? And so I was kind of saying, well, you've still got the ability to change what you write and to say to that person that this word shouldn't be here. Do you know what I mean? I'm offended by that or whatever. So,
So Sam, Alexis, Kieran, then, I mean, in a funny way, if you think about this as a social injustice, a lot of that pushback that Alexis has just described is most likely to be effective if there is some kind of organized social movement, isn't there? Some kind of, I think when an individual kind of pushes back, just as an individual, are often seen as an oddity. I mean, I remember doing when we were springing people from Inclusion Glasgow, and you know, by refusing to play the game in the way you describe people, actually sometimes made life harder for you to get people out, because the system wants you to play by the game. And so there's something about changing the rules of the game that we have to do collectively, isn't there? It's not just a personal responsibility to behave differently or think differently. Isn't there something bigger that we need to be thinking about?
there is the social movement that you described, Sam. It's called the self-advocacy movement.
Yeah.
And professionals, I've said this before, and undoubtedly I'll say it again. Professionals, commissioners, social work managers, etc., ignore self-advocacy at their peril.
Mm.
And I must admit, I was hoping that we might actually discuss the themes brought up in Alexa's video, because I made a couple of notes on kind of my own thinking on it.
What bit's that then, Kieran? Say it.
Yeah, we have time.
Yeah.
Basically, if I've actually put this into the chat as well.
Oh,
So,
have you?
yeah. If someone is subjected to the level of persecution described by Alexa, if that persecution were due to a racial difference or a religious or alternative religious or political views, that would be construed as effectively a crime against humanity under international law.
Mm. True.
And I think the thing is that we seem to accept it, don't we? You know, just talking about language and talking about the word restraint, for example, restraint. You know, it should only be used as a last resort, yet we use it to enforce medication. We use it to limit somebody's movement. And, you know, that isn't restraint, that's actually manhandling. You know, that's actually abuse. But because we're saying restraint, it's like a euphemism for what actually is happening, because obviously it is against the law.
Yeah.
And enforcing medication again is a form of restraint, isn't it? I mean, there are still cases where a medical cosh, as it's called, are basically used, isn't it? Where people are managed by basically being turned into zombies because of by medication.
I suppose
Corinne.
No,
go for it.
Well, I suppose I want to come back on your point, Kieran. So, of course, the self-advocacy movement is the critical point of pushing back, but we have failed. I mean, like even the word abuse is interesting, isn't it? Because you can use the word abuse in, broadly speaking, the disability social care world, and it kind of means exactly what it shouldn't mean. It kind of means the kind of crime we will accept, the kind of evil that we just assume will happen in services. Abuse is treated as a kind of lower class crime, and it's a lower class crime because it happens to disabled people or people with mental health problems or what, because it happens to them. I mean, it's really weird how there's a whole system for safeguarding and abuse, but if you really ask yourself, why do you have a special system for the special people, which basically means lower class policing? It means their life will be crappy because we'll stick them in somewhere shit. And then we'll create this kind of completely incompetent system for kind of we've got, there are low levels of abuse. We don't accept that in society. And I suppose the question that comes out of that for me, Kieran, is I completely agree. This is a civil rights, human rights. I mean, it's about fundamentally the right of people who are different to just exist as equals. Yet we're not getting much purchase. We're not really having that much impact. It doesn't. I mean, I think sometimes like our word might become now suddenly unacceptable. So like mental handicap is no longer acceptable, but we don't actually change the game. We just move certain pieces off the board.
Yeah.
But we've not actually got people to think differently about welcoming difference, thinking about, you know, the uniqueness of every human being and the gifts that come with disability, with autism, with just different ways of looking at the world and different ways of functioning in the world. All of the giftedness of that is still treated as just a peculiar way to look at things. And I just feel like that's something we need to be organizing around a bit in some way. Anyway, sorry, that was my rant. Alexis has got a hand up, but so has Kay. So maybe Alexis would like to say something, and Kay, and I'll try and do a better job of facilitating. Very poor at. Alexis.
Yeah. I just wanted to say and just emphasise what you said. It made me think about a comment that Susie just put in the chat a little while ago about schools, and how I'm a teacher, and how if I so much as touched a child on the shoulder, you know, to say sort of well done in a mainstream school, I could be sacked. Yet it's perfectly acceptable to restrain and restrict the movement of special educational needs children, and it's done routinely. In fact, most restraints statistically happen to under 6s. Now, why is that? Because they're probably smaller and more vulnerable. I would suggest. So I just thought that was really interesting, just building on what you were saying there, Simon.
Kay, would you like to come in?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
We can, Kay.
Hi, yeah. Well, I've only just joined, so I'm not quite sure what the topic is. Is it a different topic? So is it about the way professionals speak to people with disabilities and treat them as well?
Speak to us and speak about us, yes.
Yeah, because, well, with my son, his social worker doesn't really communicate that well with him. And he's at a spot living at the moment, and he's not happy. He's been there nearly 2 years, and from the start, he's not wanted to be there. He's communicated his unhappiness, and the social worker says, well, it's not all about what you want, and all your needs are being met there, and you're staying there. Even though his needs are not met there, some of them maybe, but not all of them. And it's like he hasn't got a voice, he's invisible, and he's not on a section, he's on a community treatment order, which ends in about 2 months. So basically it's just going to be out on his ear when it finishes. If he wants to leave, he can, but he'll have nowhere else to go. And I just wondered what other people's experiences are with social workers. You know, can they just basically just wash their hands of all responsibility? My son's on section 117, is it, aftercare as well, because he was in hospital, you know, before. So I just really wondered if anybody had similar experiences of that, and because I know that it's not right, and I have put in a complaint about this social worker, saying that it's not about what he wants, because I would have thought that, you know, he would have had a say, and it would have been about his happiness. And it's like his social worker doesn't listen to him, he doesn't consider his thoughts and feelings.
I don't know actually, Kay, and I don't know if people were on here to think about that. Does anyone have anything to say?
Yeah, I've heard of a few situations where the social worker has basically taken the person off their books as soon as they're in wherever they're going to be put, in the supported living or whatever the place is. It's like trying to get that social worker back is now impossible in a lot of places.
Well, my son doesn't want this social work. He wants to live on his own. He doesn't want to be in the system anymore. But obviously he's got nowhere to go. I'm trying to find him somewhere, and then hopefully I'll apply for direct payments. I don't really know how it all works, and I'm not getting any help from the social worker. In fact, we were supposed to have a meeting with him yesterday, and less than 24 hours previously, we found out someone else that he'd gone off sick. We've had no communication with him for several months, you know. We just feel that there's no point in having him really, because he doesn't really do much anyway.
Okay, so so you've come into a webinar about, it is connected to what you're talking about. It's talking about the way professionals use language. And the way that language can be very unhelpful. I think your issues are connected, but they're also very real world things about what's going on in your life and your son's life now. I mean, I think there are probably social workers on this call. In fact, Sam, you're a social worker, aren't you? So if you look at the ethics of social work, they're very clear that you should be listening. I think in practice, all social workers I meet are generally good people, want to do the right thing, but often what happens is actually they just don't know what to do. So when you say things like your son wants a home of their own, often I find social workers struggle to. This is part of the problem. It's not just linguistic. It's almost like the system says, here are the placements that you can put people in. The system doesn't say, hey, let's help people get homes
but it can
with
also,
real housing rights.
But it also helps social workers to continue to keep people like that, doesn't it? So, you know what I mean? It can be used effectively to keep people othered and, you know.
Keep them in the system.
In serviceland, which is what I was saying about earlier.
Sarah's got a hand up as well, Sarah Woolley.
Sarah?
Hi, I'm sorry about my washing machine in the background. Just thinking about Kay's son, does he have mental capacity? I know that's a wide subject in itself, but it's possible to get an advocate or an independent mental capacity advocate. Just an idea. You may have gone down that route anyway.
This is the thing, he's got an advocate, but she can't help him. All she does is listen to him. She can't put complaints in for him. He can't put complaints in himself. I've already put a complaint in last September about his social work and about the way his conduct. And I got told that they can't take my complaint any further until my son signs for his medical records. Well, he can't sign for his medical records, so my complaint is just in limbo. Nobody can look at the complaint. And I've just replied to them again today and said, why does my son have to sign his medical records? As is the appointee, why can't I put a complaint in? We just seem to be hitting brick walls everywhere we turn all the time.
Okay.
I did just wonder if, because this is more about language that we're talking about today, isn't it? And I know Kay's ever said, because I've spoke to Kay before, haven't I, about his son. But I wonder if there's a way of some people talking about it afterwards, maybe.
Yeah, that'd be good. Please. Yeah, that'd be good.
It's talking about your son, isn't it? And he's not here, so I'm a bit bit
Yeah.
worried about
Oh,
that,
he's
really.
fine because he gives me
Um,
time to talk to anyone.
No,
He's
that's good.
fine.
Yeah.
I'm his advocate, so he just wants me to,
So we'll try and
do what's best for him.
and you're on Facebook as well, Kay, aren't you? So people can get in contact with you there if they've got any ideas, can't they?
What's that? Sorry,
Which
Sam.
would
What
be
did you
good.
say?
So you can be contacted on Facebook, can't you?
Oh,
as well?
yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
if people want to message you. So
Yeah,
has anybody
that's
got any other? Yeah. Anything else they want to say about the presentation at all? Or do you mean any thoughts? What are people going to go away and do? Have a think.
Well, your internet just started to go funny there, Sam. So maybe at an hour and a half, that's
Did it?
it's the internet saying
Oh.
it's time for us to finish. And so I want to. Could I wrap up a little bit, Sam? And just think it's coming to the. Yes, you've definitely frozen. So your internet has definitely decided this. So I just want to thank Alexis. This is Alexis's book, Unbroken, and I'd encourage people to buy that book and hear in more detail some of Alexis's experiences. We will be putting the recording of this and the links online on the Centre for Welfare Reform's webinar page. So we'll be doing that in the next few days. So if you're interested in the topics and want to see Alexis's film again, or hear Sam's description and Kieran's thoughts, we'll do that. So I want to thank all of the speakers who were great, and the conversation, which was not quite as well managed as it should have been, which is entirely my fault because of somewhat technical difficulties I was having. And I suppose, yeah, that challenge, a double challenge really, that Sam's saying, well, what are we going to do about this in our own work? But I think it's also a bigger challenge, isn't there? How do we make it unacceptable to treat people in this way? I think that's one of the questions I'm left with anyway. How do we make it not just word by word, you should say this or you should say that, but how do we get people to change their real deeper thinking, that thinking that means that we just do not treat each other with respect when we start treating some of us as too different, too other. So a lot to think about. I've got a lot to think about, and we're exactly on 2:30, which is the end time for the webinar. And so again, I'm going to close it here and thank you all again. And please stay in touch. Subscribe to the Citizen Network TV show on the YouTube if you would like to see more things like this. All right. Bye for now, everyone. Thank you.